Hey, well, I'm hoping that I don't get hot because I'm just sitting around kind of half shaking and feeling cold. Put my sweatshirt under my coat and I'll definitely be warm enough in a minute, but I don't know. Circulation sitting around, I guess. I learned something, learned something about myself, and we'll talk about it for a second. So I'm actually I'm in the recovery phase of having gotten overly adrenalized about a minor argument with my friends and stuff. So I want to talk about why that got to me, because it was just probably a glitch in the game. And then someone complained that I'd came and had taken something that they were gathering or whatever, a gathering thing in a game, and I came and took it. So I was like, you know what? And so apparently the internet connections being slow, we saw ourselves come up to the same object at different times, and so she thought she came up first, and so she was complaining and everything, and I investigated what the thing was, and then I said that don't accuse me of doing something to someone because I won't be okay with it. I want to explain a little bit about what I learned and why that is. So, first of all, let me talk about why it is why it drove what pride and individual self-interest has to do with my reaction is important. And one of the main things that I've learned many years ago, one of the best things I learned from the Bible, I presume, unless I become too passive because of it, is that there's a proverb someplace that all strife comes from pride. It might not be pride. What would the word be? Well, exaggerated self-interest being touched, or an exaggerated self-interest being touched, is what makes people defend and come to the aggression of a fight. People are never in fights unless their personal self-interest and the protection of it has been challenged. Yeah, so we think it's the thing that you lose, that the property that you lose. You think it's your property and it's taken from you. You think you've lost your property, but you haven't lost your property. In this case, it wasn't their property. It was still in the free domain or whatever. But what you do lose is your security from someone having done something to you, or believe someone has done something to you. But anyway, pride is a self-interest that gets exaggerated, and when that gets exaggerated, then pride is what causes people to fight and to fight back. So someone will move to aggress someone, and then that one, when they recognize they're aggressed, will either be passive and forgiving or whatever, or will take the assault to their self-interest, and it will become pride for them if it makes them come into mutual aggression. And so the accusation, when I talk about accusation, why that's so important to me, is that I have learned. Let's see, did I finish that? So all fights come from an exaggerated self-interest that becomes willing to be aggressive and fight. Aggression is probably the right word, but we always think of aggression as being unnatural amount of an attitude of being contrary to people and to fight them. But the aggression is actually the act of aggressing. It's the act of bringing force to someone. And in our little world here with my grandchildren, right now we have the older girl is 4, and then the younger boy is just about turned 3, and um, he causes a bunch of trouble by saying no all the time. They pretend something. She says so and so. He says no. We're pretending so and so, and like he doesn't say pretend, but he fights his triggering of his aggression to put him into a fight comes from him just deciding that he wants it this way, and so he's going to defend his idea, and he's going to be willing to fight. But then she has not yet learned that she doesn't get to tell people what to do. So when she tells people what to do, she comes with an aggression to them, and if it touches their pride, then they say no, and then they can fight. Both in the one who gets their pride touched and then turns it to aggression and gets into the fight isn't innocent of the fight. They're equally guilty of the fight, even though they didn't trigger it, because they decided that they would go into a fight. So understanding righteousness and how it works has me be a little bit different than other people, because I recognize that righteousness is pretty much purely harmlessness. It's the valuing of someone else in love, and to value them and their security and their sovereignty, to leave them alone, and it's what keeps you from aggressing them, and then therefore coming into a fight with them, and therefore being condemned and losing the value of your full righteousness, because now you're in a fight where a judge could intervene. I pretty much left our conversation because our other friend was trying to explain herself to me, and I was having adrenaline for the first time in a conflict situation in months, so I was not going to necessarily be one to sit and explain, and I said, again, what I'm saying is don't accuse me, because I won't be okay with it. Not here because of this little thing, but that is as an overarching thing in my world is something that is not acceptable. And I won't aggress people by accusing them of almost ever. And the lessons that it took me to learn it, you wouldn't believe what I learned from. You might think I was crazy, actually, if I told you, like some of the main things about what made me learn not to attack things. Like my Christian friends, they would just presume that there was a devil there and just like attack some invisible devil or whatever, not even thinking about that they're aggressing a being, or believe that they're aggressing a being, not even thinking anything about that. It's their fault if they start a fight. If it's World War II or whatever, and there's a Japanese guy standing there, and and you decide you're gonna fight him because he's a Jap, it's your fault, not their fault for being a Jap. Being a Japanese guy or whatever in that situation, he doesn't become the enemy. You don't put the racial slur on there to the degree that you're going to bring aggression to them, because it's you that's aggressing them. People acting like, just saying, well, so-and-so is the enemy or whatever, then we can do whatever we want. That's what's been wickedness right along the whole time. The way you love them is measure them as a full individual man, like unto yourself, and you leave them alone, and you won't accuse them unless you know for sure that something's going on and that you're there to help. Accusation for the sake of accusation is what devil is. Why they talk about devil in the New Testament. Is what devilish is. So I don't believe, I'm not saying that there's a demon driving my friend to say something accusatory to me, but I'm not saying that they're not. But if someone behaves as if that's going on and does the actions that would be in play, if that inspiration and that driving, if they were under the command of such a spirit or whatever, they did the same thing as that, then some individual has decided that they're going to, that something is important enough, they're going to aggress someone, and they're going to put themselves in a place where there could be a fight. And if the other one uses their personal force first to defense is blocking a punch. Then anything after that goes into the fight is now your your decision and your judgment to go into that aggression. So I recognize this is how righteousness works. A few minutes ago in some weird context, I was thinking, that in the old days, like the Western show, they take someone out in the street and shoot them dead or whatever. That came from touching their pride. But what was different in the old days is that people's honor and their righteousness were important still, because they didn't have a city of anonymity to bathe in. They had to keep their righteousness intact so that they would be okay in the community and be able to be within the safety of the community, because outside was wilderness and possibly savages or whatever. So people would, their honor was not important because they were prideful. Their honor was important because their righteousness was important enough to them. They weren't going to take it being impugned. So people were careful when people carried guns on their hip all the time, not to impugn someone's honor, because that guy might just think his righteousness is worth killing to defend. So this is how it used to be, and now, like my friend Cody, I told him one of the best lessons about righteousness that he'd ever heard, and his eyes kind of popped and everything. But then he also, in the same conversation, tells me people don't care about righteousness, Joe, and I don't agree that it's true. You get a judge, find a guy who's a judge as his day job or whatever, and and dishonor that guy. And you see what happens then. Some people care about that kind of thing. And what we do in the game is just really a microcosm kind of a thing. But see, this is the reason that it's important to me. And what I started to say, and kind of why I did this, is I recognize that I have pride in being harmless. I recognize that righteousness is harmlessness. And to be unable to be accused of being a harmer or an aggressor is the way that you maintain your righteousness. And then people most of the time cooperate with that kind of stuff and don't think anything of it. But then, in a time when people weren't thinking, that that's just making a judgment, someone's wrong, and whipping out your accusation because you can do that, sit and watch the news. My brother and his wife used to drive me crazy because they turned the news on and then they'd sit there and accuse people they were watching on the news of the wrongdoing they saw or whatever they were doing. They're sitting there in front of a monitor taking rumors and things that are deceptive at worst and often deceptive as normal, and just stuff that didn't matter to them, people they never met before, and now they turn off the news and they just got done sitting there and accusing 5 or 10 people of being unrighteous, people they've never met, and they don't have any information about whether it was right or not, what they did. Sitting around accusing people, being devilish, and Satan is a word for accuser, being accusers without even realizing the importance of that, because it never starts a fight. Because if people are in your world, they're not even in your world. Like, you start a fight with this guy, but that guy's way over there. You never see him in your entire life. You're starting a fight with someone you can't resolve a fight with. I went down to a parking lot by the dock, by some docks in Coos Bay. There's a bunch of seagulls around on the ground, hundreds of them. I sat there and made a video that I called Unresolved Controversies. It's on my Facebook somewhere back probably in 2012, late mid 2012 maybe. And the thing was, it's like, if you accuse someone who doesn't hear you, how do you get forgiven for your attack? Your attack might not hurt very much. It doesn't hurt them at all because they don't even know. They don't know to forgive you, but you put an accusation out into the air. Why is an important question. How do you stop? Is not that hard of a deal. I mean, you can do it when you recognize what you're doing. But people accuse people all the time. And the people that are worth listening to, and the righteous people, are the ones who understand that something's going on when that happens, and they're careful not to do that. My friend is like that. She doesn't have a problem with sitting around accusing people all the time. We don't necessarily feel that good. We might not be in that good of a mood and everything. But that I won't be in a controversy with someone unless I won't fight in a controversy with someone. But if I'm a judge in a controversy, if I use my priesthood and my ability to peacemake when there's a controversy, then it wouldn't touch me, and I wouldn't be one of the aggressors. But in that the condemnation for unrighteousness comes in the accusation and the fight. It's always there. That's what moves people down from their righteous state. They're peaceful and harmless, and then there's an accusation and a fight starts, and those people, while they're in the fight, are condemned from their normal place. They're diminished because a judge can get in between them and break them up. Because peace has been broken by one, and then peace has been further broken by the other as they fight. My science of it is on the wall there, being wasted, and probably goes to the grave with me. It's the craziest thing ever. So in the first, okay, should I do that? I'm just 16 minutes. The reason I think and know about these things and think about them is because when I became self-directed, came into becoming a righteousness expert and a peacemaker expert, and one who should be teaching a peacemaker conference every day that I can get on the stage. But that's never been presented to me. The way that comes about is there was a certain amount of things that Jesus talked about in peacemaking things in Matthew 18. If your brother offends you, go to him. And if you can't win your brother, then do these things. And there's a certain set of things that were there. Before that stuff ever happens, some of what my message is the measurement of the value and the judgment of them and the willingness to move to force them. So the beginning of force, the bad judgment of their value and making an unequal judgment, and then believing that you are going to overpower them or do something to harm them, and then they get in a fight with you and righteousness is broken. Both of you are in the place where it would be said to the one who was harmed, go to your brother, and if your brother hears you, you've won your brother. If not, then. So this fight all comes from an action of aggression and harm, but what comes before that act of aggression and harm is a judgment of your value as more than those, and their value as less than yours, and them as being worthy of taking the force that you decide to bring to them. The breaking of righteousness comes from that judgment and that devaluing of them and diminishing them to the place where you'll move to force them and behave as if you own them. You control what you own. You don't control what you don't own. You don't own that man. You don't get to control him. You don't get to bring force to him. And when you would accuse someone of bringing force that knows this and refuses to do this in their life habitually as a matter of their character, then when you accuse them of having brought you unjust force, then if they haven't done that, then they might get the idea that they're in a fight with you, and they might get adrenaline. They might have to turn their game off until they feel like they're not going to say anything that continues within that fight. I refuse to be condemned and be unrighteous to be in a fight, and especially about something that doesn't matter at all, and only would matter to me if my pride has been hurt. But what I was trying to say is that my pride was hurt because I apparently have pride in being harmless. What it takes to trigger my pride is to accuse me of doing something harmful, and me not being loving, completely loving, and understanding the value of someone and their sovereignty, and move to aggress them, something that I refuse to do. So when it's been implied or said openly that I've done such a thing, then I can't live with that, and that's why I say something and don't just shrug and go do something else. And when I recognize that I'm half shaky because adrenaline is kicked up because I'm not not in the practice of being in conflicts, and I recognize I'm putting a conflict into it, and I recognize that I'm coming with a returned force. And after I defended myself, which I've done already in the game, then I'm not including myself in that anymore. I'll talk about the lessons of it and why I won't, but I won't. Now, if it had been a more serious matter that wasn't just like someone got annoyed because things weren't going well in the game and they were in the mood or whatever, and then thought that their friend was not treating them properly, I wouldn't treat my friend improperly by my decision and by my will and by my chosen actions. I wouldn't say I'd rather die, but it's not far from that. Killing people in a battleground that you love and wish they didn't have to die, but you got to kill somebody in a battleground. That's play, and when it comes out of play, for me, it is going to matter. It's going to have to do with something that matters to me and at a character level. So, excuse me. Anyway, I really need to stay kind of peaceful and calm. I seem to be a little bit volatile. Imagine that. Being tortured by your evil government in solitary confinement, being treated like a slave and treated like a contaminant. That gets you in an emotional state that's really good for you and puts you at your ability to play your best game. Holy crap. That'll do it for now.